Wyoming Territory, September 1883. The wind was howling across the foothills when Fletcher Grady stepped into his barn and found a pregnant woman curled up in the hay, shivering and asleep beside his old mule. He froze. Her dress was torn at the hem, dust caked her boots, and her belly round and heavy rose and fell with each shallow breath. Her arms were folded around it like she was trying to keep the child safe even in sleep. "Ma'am," he said carefully. She startled awake, eyes wide and wild, scrambling back into the shadows until her spine hit the wall of the stall. Her hand shot out like she meant to protect herself, but it was shaking too hard to do much. "I ain't gonna hurt you," Fletcher said, keeping his voice low. "You are safe here. This is my land, my barn, name's Fletcher Grady." She blinked, her mouth parted, then her gaze dropped to his boots like she was trying to figure out if she could trust him. I did not mean to trespass," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "I just needed somewhere dry." "You are welcome to it," he said. Then, after a beat, "What is your name?" She hesitated. Vera Montgomery." That name did not ring any bells, but the fear in her eyes was real. She looked like she had been running a long time. And she was close to delivering. He had seen enough mare's birth to know when a body was near the end. "Come on," he said, offering a hand. "You cannot stay in the barn tonight, you will freeze. I got stew on the fire and a bed that is warmer than hay." Her fingers hovered near his, then slowly closed around them. Her grip was weak, but her shoulders eased a little. Inside the cabin, Fletcher draped a quilt over her shoulders and handed her a mug of water. She drank all of it fast, then ate 3 spoonfuls of stew before setting the bowl down like it was too heavy. After a while, she leaned back into the chair and closed her eyes. "You have anyone I can send word to?" he asked gently. "Family?" She shook her head. "No one." He waited, but she did not say more. He let her sleep in his bed that night while he took the chair by the fire. He did not sleep much. She had that look about her, the kind of pain that was not just physical, and he had seen enough of that in the war to recognize it. By morning, she had not run. She was still there, curled beneath his quilt, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. The days passed quiet at first. Vera never said much, but she helped where she could. She peeled potatoes with slow care, mended a shirt he had torn on barbed wire, and once when he came inside with mud caked up to his knees from digging a post hole, he caught the barest smile tug at her lips. She never laughed. Not once. And Fletcher found he missed the sound, even though he had never heard it. One afternoon, a cold rain rolled in over the hills. He came in early from the pasture and found her at the window, watching the gray sky with a faraway look. "You have a wife?" she asked without turning. "No," he said. "Never found the right one," she nodded. "I had a man once, thought he meant to marry me, then I ended up with child. He did not stick around." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "Then he is a fool." She looked over at him then. "I was not looking for pity. You did not get any." "Just the truth." Their eyes held. Vera looked away first, but her voice was softer when she spoke again. "I have been alone a long time. You are not alone now." She looked down at her hands. "You do not even know me. I know you are strong and kind. And brave enough to walk across half the damn prairie to protect that child." Her eyes glassed over, but she blinked fast and did not let the tears fall. 3 weeks went by. The baby was due soon, and the nights were getting colder. Fletcher had started sleeping inside again on the floor, just in case she needed him in the night. She never asked, but he stayed anyway. One night she woke him with a cry. It was time. He helped her through it. Hours of pain and blood and holding her hand while she screamed into his shoulder. And then finally a cry, high and clear, filled the cabin. Vera sobbed as he handed her the baby, a red-faced boy with fists like a fighter. She named him Caleb. Fletcher did not think he would ever forget the way she looked then, sweaty, exhausted, weeping and smiling like the sun was rising inside her. The next day she asked him, "Why did you not turn me away that night?" "I do not know," he said honestly. "Something in me just knew not to." She stared at him. "I was a stranger." "Not anymore." She looked down at Caleb, who was asleep on her chest. You are the first man who ever kept his word to me, he swallowed. You are the first woman I ever wanted to make a life with, her eyes shot up. I mean it, he said. I want you here, you and Caleb. I want to look after you both, not because you need me, but because I want to. She was quiet a long time, then she reached out and took his hand. I never thought I would get to love someone again, she whispered, but I do. I love you, he smiled, and it felt like something inside him unlocked. I love you too, Vera Montgomery, more than I ever thought I could love anyone. She leaned in and kissed him, soft, sure, and for the first time in years, Fletcher knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. The first frost came early that October. Fletcher had to break the ice in the water troughs each morning, and the sky took on that thin, pale blue that never quite warmed no matter how long the sun sat overhead. Vera stayed in the cabin with Caleb, who fussed less now and slept longer, his cheeks full and pink from steady nursing. Fletcher came in one evening with a bundle of kindling under his arm and found Vera standing by the hearth, her hair pulled back in a loose braid, sleeves rolled up as she stitched a soft bonnet from an old cotton shift. "You ever fix a saddle?" she asked, not looking up. He set the wood down and dusted off his hands. "Some. Why?" "I got a tear in one of the straps on your rig. Saw it this morning when I went out for the wash. I could mend it tomorrow if you show me how the threading works." He leaned against the wall, watching her fingers work the needle. "You do not have to fix tack, Vera." "I know," she said, "but I want to. If I'm living here, I want to pull weight." He stepped closer and touched the edge of the bonnet she was sewing. "You already do." She paused, thread between her fingers, then turned and looked up at him. "I want to learn everything, how to run this place, not just cook and mend. I want to know what it takes to keep this land going." He hadn't expected that. Most folks didn't ask to take on more than what was needed, but she wasn't like most folks. He saw it in the way she studied snowfall patterns through the window now, or lined up dried herbs on the shelf in tidy rows. "I'll teach you," he said. "Start with the fence lines tomorrow. I'll show you how to spot where the wire's wearing thin." She nodded. "And after that, we'll see how you handle a branding iron." That made her laugh, low and sudden. It startled them both. By the time the kettle whistled, her bonnet was finished. She tucked it into a drawer beside the cradle and took Caleb in her arms. Fletcher couldn't stop watching her, how she whispered to the boy as she rocked him, how her hands knew just where to press and when to loosen. "You ever think about schooling?" she asked, eyes on the fire. "For me, for Caleb." "When he's old enough." He crouched beside her, resting a hand on the cradle's edge. Caleb's tiny fingers twitched in his sleep. "I was taught by a circuit rider," he said. "Came twice a month when I was a boy, taught letters, sums, scripture. I figure we could do the same. What about books? There's a man in Douglas sells old ones. I'll ride in come spring, see what he's got." She looked over at him, something soft in her face. "You'd ride all that way just for that?" "I'd ride twice as far." "For both of you?" Her throat worked like she was trying not to cry, but she didn't break. Instead, she reached out and laid her fingers over his. "You ever think you'd end up with a family?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I think I was always waiting on it, didn't know what for. Just knew something was missing." Her hand tightened over his. "Me too." Later that week, he showed her how to check the fence posts along the northern boundary. The wind was sharp, and she wore one of his coats over her dress, sleeves rolled at the wrists and collar turned up high. She listened without interrupting, asked questions he hadn't expected, and when they stopped to rest beside a dry creek, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a single folded paper. "This is my mother's name," she said. "She died before I turned 12. But she was the one person who ever made me feel steady." He took the paper gently, saw the name Marjorie Elms in careful script. "You remind me of her," Vera said. "Not in how you talk, just in the way you stay." He looked at her then, really looked. Her eyes were darker in the shade, steady as the mountains behind her. She didn't flinch from the silence. "You're not going anywhere, are you?" she asked. "No," he said. "I reckon you're stuck with me," she smiled. "Good." That night, while Vera tucked Caleb in, Fletcher went out to the shed and found the cradle he'd slept in as a baby, still sturdy after all those years. He sanded it down, rubbed oil into the wood, and carved a small pine tree into the headboard. When he brought it inside, she ran her fingers over the carving. "What's it mean, Roots?" he said. "You and me, him too." She looked up at him, eyes full in the firelight. "Fletcher Grady, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." He leaned in and kissed her, slow and sure, with nothing rushed in it. Just the kind of promise that didn't need words. Outside, the wind moved through the grass, and inside, the cradle rocked steady beneath the eaves. By mid-November, the wind carried a sharpness that cut through wool and leather both, and the days shortened until supper lamps were lit by late afternoon. Vera had taken to rising before dawn, feeding Caleb with one arm while pulling her shawl tighter with the other. Fletcher didn't ask her to. She just did it, steady as the frost on the sill each morning. One morning, while she boiled water for washing, her gaze lingered on the shelf above the hearth. "You ever think about building on?" she asked, voice quiet. Fletcher set down his tin cup. "To the cabin. There's barely room for us now. Caleb won't stay small forever. He'll start crawling come spring." He leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "I reckon I could start cutting timber after the thaw, add a second room off the rear wall." Her fingers stayed busy with the kettle handle. "And maybe a place to keep books, if he takes to letters." "You planning ahead," he said. "I'm planning home." That word sat between them for a long moment, warm as the fire. Later that week, Fletcher took her with him to the south pasture. She wore a scarf across her hair, the ends tucked into her collar, and Caleb was wrapped snug against her chest in a sling she'd stitched from an old curtain. The horses needed checking after a night of howling wind, and Vera insisted on coming. As they moved along the fence line, she asked, "How did your folks come to settle this land?" He nodded toward the creek bed below. "My grandfather came up from Missouri right after the war with Mexico, took a claim near the cottonwoods. My father kept it going after he passed. I took it from him when he fell sick." She adjusted Caleb's sling, then looked out toward the ridge where the sun was breaking gold through the clouds. "I never stayed anywhere longer than a season. We went wherever work or luck took us. You ever miss that?" "No," she said. "Not anymore." They reached the fence post where a strand of wire had snapped clean in two. Fletcher knelt and opened his tool bag. Vera crouched beside him, watching as he looped and twisted the wire through the eyelet. "Where'd you learn all this?" she asked. "My father taught me. After the war, I came back full of noise in my head, couldn't sleep. He put a pair of pliers in my hand and told me to fix what I could, said it'd quiet me." She didn't speak right away. "I'm glad you came back," she said finally. He looked up at her, her cheeks pink with cold hair blown loose from her scarf. "I didn't feel like I belonged to anything for a long time," he said. "Not until you showed up in that barn." Her gloved hand brushed his. "I didn't think I had a place either. Not until you gave me one." That night, after Caleb had gone down easy, they sat by the fire with their boots off and a pot of beans simmering between them. Fletcher was carving a hairbrush handle from a strip of aspen, and Vera was patching the elbow of one of his flannel shirts. "You ever think about more?" she asked. He looked up. "Children," she nodded. "Someday, when we're ready." "I wouldn't mind a daughter," he said. "One with your steadiness." She smiled, then leaned back against the hearth. "If we had a girl, I'd name her after my mother." "Marjorie," he nodded slowly. "Then we will." The wind picked up outside, rattling the shutters. Vera stood and drew the curtain closed, then turned toward him, her eyes lit low and warm. "I want to marry you, Fletcher," she said, voice sure. "Not just live here. I want to be yours in name." He rose, setting the carving aside. "You already are, Vera, but I'll say the vows with you. I want that too." "We'll need someone to do it," she said. "There's a preacher rides through from Rock Creek. Due around Christmas." She stepped into his arms, resting her cheek against his chest. "Then come Christmas, I'll be Vera Grady." He held her close, his hand resting lightly on the back of her neck. "You'll be my wife, and I'll be your husband. And nothing will ever carry you away from here again." She didn't answer with words, just held him tighter. Outside, the snow began to fall, soft and slow, blanketing the land that had waited all this time for all three of them to come home. A week before Christmas, the preacher arrived on horseback with a red scarf wrapped around his collar and a Bible tucked into his saddlebag. He shook Fletcher's hand with a firm grip, then turned to Vera and tipped his hat with a quiet, "Ma'am." They stood in the clearing behind the cabin, snow packed firm beneath their boots, a pine bough nailed over the door and a ribbon Vera had dyed with black walnut tied to her braid. Caleb slept inside, watched over by a neighbor woman from 2 ridges over who'd come at Vera's invitation. Her name was Lucinda, soft-spoken and broad-shouldered. Her sleeves rolled to the elbow as she stirred a pot of beans over the fire. The vows were spoken simply. No audience but the wind and the preacher. Fletcher looked down at Vera's hands in his, raw from the cold but strong, and repeated the words with a steadiness he hadn't known he had until her. When it was done, the preacher took their names in a small ledger and wished them a long life. He stayed for a single cup of chicory before heading back the way he came, promising to return once the thaw set in. Vera didn't let go of Fletcher's hand even after the man rode out of sight. "You ever think you'd live to see something like this?" she asked. He glanced toward the cabin. Not once. Inside, Lucinda had warmed the room with cinnamon bark and pine resin. Caleb woke with a soft fuss and settled again the moment Vera lifted him to her shoulder. Lucinda washed her hands in the basin and dried them on her skirt. "He's a good boy," she said. "Looks like he'll favor his mama." Vera traced one finger across Caleb's brow. "He's got Fletcher's eyes, same way they go quiet when he's listening." Lucinda's brows lifted. "That's a rare thing for a man." Fletcher set another log on the fire. "Makes up for my poor sense of direction." That night, after Lucinda left, Vera stood by the hearth sewing a strip of muslin for Caleb's swaddling. Fletcher sat nearby, sharpening the blade of his draw knife. "I don't think I ever thanked you," she said. "For what?" "For giving me more than I even knew to want." He set the knife aside. "You gave me the same." She folded the cloth once, then again. "You had a choice that first night. You could have turned me out." He crossed the space between them and placed his hand at the small of her back. "I reckon my heart decided before my head ever caught up." She leaned into him, her shoulder against his chest. "What if we raise Caleb to believe in second chances? Not the kind where you forget what came before, but the kind where you carry it and still choose to love anyway." Fletcher rested his chin on her temple. "Then he'll grow up strong in the right ways." Later, he brought down a small cedar box from the loft. Inside was a single item, his mother's brooch, shaped like a swallow in flight. "She wore it on her wedding day," he said. "Wanted it passed down when the time came." Vera touched the metal gently. "You sure?" "I'm sure." She pinned it to her collar, her fingers shaking just slightly. "I never had anything like this growing up. No heirlooms, no stories passed down." He took her hand. "Then we'll start them here." Their first night as husband and wife passed in quiet comfort, no fanfare, no celebration beyond the warmth of their shared bed and the hush of the wind outside. Vera fell asleep with Caleb in the cradle beside her and Fletcher's arm draped over her waist, her breath slow against the curve of his neck. Outside, the snow deepened under the moonlight, and inside, the cabin held steady. A home, at last built not of timber alone, but of promises kept and days still to come. The first thaw came slowly, in patches the snow sinking into the hard earth in rivulets, the roof dripping steady through the morning while the creek below cracked its ice in long, echoing groans. Fletcher had started marking off the land where the new room would be added, pacing it with measured strides and a bit of chalk from the ledger shelf. Vera watched from the porch, Caleb bundled against her chest, his eyes wide at the sudden song of returning birds. That afternoon, she brought him a cup of boiled dandelion root in a tin mug and stood beside him at the edge of the flagged posts. "You ever think about what you want this place to look like in 10 years?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, but traced a line between 2 stakes with his boot. Barn'll need to be rebuilt by then. Roof's holding, but not for long, and I figure we'll need a second corral if we breed the mares." She nodded. "I was thinking more about what it'll feel like, what we'll be doing, how many children we might have." He glanced at her sideways. "You planning that far ahead already?" "I am," she said. "Not because I want more right now, but because I want to know where I'm headed. I never had that before." He took her hand, rough and red from washing, and pressed it to his chest. "Wherever it is, I'll be right there." She leaned into him, Caleb nestled between them. "I want to learn to ride proper," she said. "Not just sit side saddle and hold on. I want to know how to break a filly from the start." He raised a brow. "You ready for that?" Her eyes lit with a quiet certainty. "I am." Within a week, Fletcher had chosen the gentlest gelding from the herd, a gray with a smooth gait and a patient mouth. Vera practiced in the near pasture, first with Fletcher walking beside her, then on her own, circling wide under the open sky. She laughed more often now, not just when something was funny, but when something was hers, her seat in the saddle, her control over the reins, her own strength surfacing where fear had once lived. One morning, as she brought the gelding back to the barn, she dismounted and ran her hand down his neck. "You think Caleb'll grow up wanting to ride?" she asked. Fletcher leaned on the gate. "If he's anything like you, he won't wait till he's told it's time." She smiled and untied her scarf, tucking it into her coat pocket. "I want him to know he can ask questions, not just do what's expected." Fletcher nodded. "Then we raise him that way." They spent the next weeks hauling timber from the ridge, Fletcher sawing and stacking while Vera measured the boards and kept the ledger of supplies. Caleb lay watching from a basket lined with wool, gurgling softly. Lucinda came every third day, bringing milk and sometimes a wheel of cheese, and stayed long enough to help Vera render lard or stitch new bedding from flour sacks. In early April, Fletcher stood back from the cabin and studied the new frame rising from the rear wall. Vera came up beside him, squinting into the sun. "Window'll face morning light," he said. "You'll be able to see the creek when you wake." She crossed her arms, surveying it. "And the shelf, already cut. You'll have room for every book we find." They stayed like that for a while, the wind lifting her braid, the sound of the creek swelling with meltwater. "You ever think you'd end up with a woman like me?" she asked, not teasing, just curious. "No," he said. "But I think I spent half my life looking for you without knowing it." She tilted her head. "You think we'll ever leave this place? Travel, maybe? Only if we take it with us," she chuckled. "You mean Caleb, the mule, and the whole barn?" "I mean the way it feels here. I've known land that was worth keeping, but this is different. This is the first time it's felt like belonging." She took his hand and squeezed it. "Then we'll stay." By the time the new room was done, Fletcher had built a cradle from the same pine he'd used for the house frame. Vera lined it with soft wool and stitched Caleb's initials into the corner of the quilt. They moved into the added space on the first warm evening of May, sleeping with the window cracked open and the smell of damp earth rising through the floorboards. That night, Vera lay beside him with the moonlight brushing her face and whispered, "I didn't think I'd get to keep anything good, not for long." He drew her close, her head on his shoulder. "You kept me. You gave yourself," she said. "And I gave myself back." They fell asleep that way, breathing together, the baby nestled in the cradle a few feet away, the wind soft outside. Years passed, slow and full. Fletcher taught Caleb to mend a fence before he turned 7, and Vera taught him to read from a Bible with a cracked leather cover and the catalogs Fletcher brought home after trips to Douglas. They added another child in early spring, a girl with dark eyes and a cry like a hawk's. They named her Marjorie, and Vera held her to her chest and wept, not from sorrow, but from knowing the name had come home. The land held steady. Fletcher built the second corral. Vera planted a kitchen garden with Lucinda's help. The barn was rebuilt before the first snow of their 8th winter together. They never left the land, but it never stayed still either. It grew with them, changed with the weight of their days. In the evenings, after supper and chores, Fletcher would sit on the porch with Vera curled against his side, the children asleep inside, the stars wheeling overhead. He'd rest a hand on hers and say nothing, and she'd lean into him with a quiet that no longer needed to be filled. And when neighbors passed through, they'd point to the house and say, "That's the Grady place, built strong, built to last," and it had been, and it would be.